Next up, I'm excited to bring to you Debra Borchardt. A bit of an introduction for Debra, so you get a feel for where she's been. Debra is the co-founder and chief executive officer of Green Market Media. She's also the editor-in-chief of websites Green Market News, Cannabis Craft, and Philly 420. In addition, she's covered the cannabis industry from a financial perspective for the past 5 years, gaining expertise in the business on the Today Show, CNBC, numerous radio programs and podcasts. Prior to that, she's spent 20 years in the financial industry, so I think she knows what she's talking about. So no further ado, Debra Borchardt, thank you.
Alumni, but that's okay. So as he said, I have a background in the securities industry. I worked at Bear Stearns for almost 15 years, got out, sold my stock before they went under, so that was a good thing. And I have been writing about the securities industry for a while. I'm a financial reporter, and I started covering cannabis probably about 5-6 years ago. And the real reason I got into it was because of some of the really dodgy, shady pot stocks that Neil alluded to. There are 300 publicly traded marijuana stocks, but I would say probably 75% of them are terrible and dodgy and shady, and you just do not want to invest in them. But here's something that's been kind of interesting about the market, and that is the effect of legalization of adult use marijuana and what it's done to the medical market. And it's something that a lot of people were not expecting, but it came out as a result of getting some of the real hard data that we got. Now, this slide just kind of shows you something that we've already kind of talked about today, just a little bit of the history of medical marijuana going back to 2700 BC. And then, as Neil said, there are companies that sold marijuana and cannabis. In the mid-century, you have Eli Lilly, Pfizer was one. So this was pretty common to buy cannabis from your doctor to help you out with whatever you were suffering from. So in this slide, you see here where, and this is the Colorado data, there is virtually no California data because they are an unregulated market. But Colorado was very smart, and when they legalized adult use and medical, they wanted to keep track of everything. So we have a lot of good hard data. So you see here the medical use in 2012, it was about 150 million plus sales, and then it shot up, but then it's kind of just lumped along. It's kind of just stayed steady. Whereas here in 2014, you saw the recreational use, and as you see here in 2014 on the medical side, the sales dropped down a little bit. And then in 2015 and 16, you see there where the recreational use has skyrocketed. Now here's something that's a little, kind of puts things a little bit in perspective. You'll see there on 2016 that the sales for adult use were $850 million, which seems like a lot. In just the last 4 months in California, with just medical use legal, they've done over $800 million in 4 months. So California is really, really going to shift this market. So when we looked at Colorado and we started to look at what was going on in the medical market once recreational came on, we saw that the card holders fell. And it had peaked at 128,000 in 2011. It's currently now at 86,000, which is kind of an interesting thing. And new applications went down. Now, chronic pain accounts for 80 to 85% of all patients. This is always the holy grail when you're legalizing medical marijuana. You want chronic pain. And the reason you want that is, well, we saw that in California. You would go to a doctor on Venice Beach and say, yeah, I got a headache a week. And they'd say, oh, chronic pain. And you would get a prescription. And so that was, and it's not to try to diminish the people that really do suffer from real chronic pain and that this helps them. But there was definitely a crowd that wanted the legalized marijuana just because they really wanted to get high, and that was their way in. So when we look here, this is what gets kind of really more interesting, is that argument that, well, they only legalized marijuana, medical marijuana, so that people could get high. And everybody went, no, that's not it. Well, what the numbers were showing us, though, were that medical sales jumped up at the holiday times, just like recreational. So holiday season, sales always jump. And then the 420 holiday, which is a big holiday, jumped up as well. Now, if you've got diabetes and you take insulin, you're not taking more insulin in the holidays, and you're not taking more insulin in April. So it was clear that there were a lot of people on the medical side that were really recreational clients. So that's Colorado. We saw that happening there. So then we were like, well, is this happening elsewhere? So let's look at the other states that did the same thing, that legalized adult use. And we see here in Oregon, the same thing. As we go further into legalized recreational use, the patients drop and the new applications drop. And then over there, you've got Alaska with the cardholder count, same thing. Those numbers started to fall once you got into legalized adult use. This just kind of goes into prohibition now and such. But let's talk about the reasons why we have this decline. So on the one hand, it's a heck of a lot easier to buy marijuana in a dispensary than to go to a doctor and get a prescription. And I'm just curious, raise your hands if you've been into a dispensary. Okay. So the first time you go into a dispensary, it's kind of mind-blowing. There's all these products and there's all this stuff, and it's like, oh my God, this is crazy. It's just a heck of a lot easier to go to a dispensary and buy a CBD product than to make an appointment with a doctor, get a prescription, go get it filled, and your insurance isn't going to cover it anyway. So why are you going to go through all that effort when you can just as easily go to a dispensary? A lot of times there are lower taxes, but that's just not been enough to motivate people to just stick with the doctors. And then, as I said, there's a lot of recreational patients that were claiming reasons to make legal purchases. Now, the big concern here in the industry is, okay, so now we've got this data and it's being proven and we know what we're dealing with. What are the negative consequences of the shift that really, I would say, most people in the cannabis industry did not expect to see? So there is a lot of concern that the investment money is just going to go shift all the way over to recreational. That it's where the money is, follow the money. If you are making a medical product, at the end of the day, you're thinking, I want to hire more people, I want to expand, I want to grow. My customers are leaving me. I'm going to start to make more adult use products. So it starts to take away from that. We're also there's a lot of concern that it's going to take away money from research, because again, if all the money is going into the adult use side, there's going to be less of motivation to do the types of research that the doctor was talking about that we really do need. We're just starting to get into some really cool research on things like kids with autism, on old people with dementia and Alzheimer's. That's being done in Israel. There's just so much out there that they want to study and test. And so there's a real concern that if this starts to take away from the medical market, that it's definitely going to be a problem. Now, of course, the anti-marijuana groups feel very vindicated. They're like, ha ha ha, see, we told you that this was a ploy to get there. And to some extent, they may have been a little bit right. I ran this video and I thought this would be kind of interesting if you guys wanted to see it. And what it does is it traces whoops. Let's see if I can get. How do I diminish?
Escape.
Oh, escape. So I shot this video, and one of the processes that you'll see with cannabis is vape pens. And a lot of people don't have that kind of access that I have to see how this gets made. So I thought it would be kind of interesting just to show you the journey from the plant to the end product, so you kind of see a little bit of what we're talking about with regards to the medical and the recreational. We're also seeing that a lot of the dispensaries, like I said, carry both products, and we're also starting to see where a lot of the states are now merging the departments together, where now you're having the medical fall under the recreational. So I think with that kind of merging happen, it's going to start to pull away even more from the medical side. So here we go.
So how does a cannabis vape pen get made? Well, let's trace the life of an open vape product. It starts with the cannabis plant at the grow facilities, which is tagged. Then the harvested cannabis is trimmed by workers, and the finished product is bagged and once again tagged for that all-important inventory. It gets sent to the Organa Labs in big drums. This room can hold a ton of marijuana. It is ready to be processed. Here's a bin showing the inventory tagging that again tracks all of the marijuana that comes to Organa Labs. The company produces in small batches. This particular machine takes 3.5 pounds of marijuana. It is then going through a process that removes the cannabinoids and terpenes. They were separated into 3 different vessels. Here's the terpene being collected. The terpene gives the cannabis its flavor and its smell.
We're going to heat up the oil so it's thin. We're going to add ethanol to it, and we're going to start homogenizing that so we can dissolve all the waxes that are present, all the fats, all the lipids. Once we do that at a high temperature, we put that into a freezer and we reduce the temperature dramatically. What that does is precipitate the waxes that were dissolved, and then we can filter them and remove them. And then what comes through is ethanol and cannabis oil. So from there, we do another filtration process to do a little bit of a decolorization. We remove all the ethanol, and then after we remove the ethanol, we can collect the refined oil over at our other station.
The cannabis oil is distilled 2 more times to pull out any remaining impurities. Here on the right, you see chlorophyll still coming out, and on the left is the finished cannabis oil product ready for consumers. The Organa Labs workers fill each oil cartridge by hand. This is the 250 milligram entry-level cartridge. Organa brand says it is its bestseller, and they sell over 1 million units per year. Here's the product on the shelves, and it is now ready to be boxed up and sent out to the dispensaries for those retail customers. Organa Brands prides itself on its marketing materials and its professional packaging. It's easy for the customer to see and identify an Organa Brands product. And that, my friends, is how the cannabis goes from the plant to the oil to the consumer.
So just to give you an idea, Organa Brands did over 100 million in sales last year alone, one company. They do also have a medical product, but it's certainly not their big seller. So anyway, it's going to be kind of interesting to see where we go with this. As California comes on, we'll start to get some real hard data from them, and we'll see how the market changes. But it's definitely been a very interesting turn of events to see how the adult use market has started to take away from the medical market.